Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I just had a couple of housekeeping items. I'm Allison Smalley. I work in advancement. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. If you would like to share where you're joining us from, as well as your affiliation with CMU or your graduation year. We do have everybody muted, not to silence you, just to help with feedback issues if we have them. We encourage you to use the chat to ask questions as well if you're comfortable. We will be monitoring that the entire time as well. It's meant to be a two-way, conversation. There will be question and answer time as well. So whenever you would like to join in is great. I would like to go ahead and introduce Dean Paula Lancaster, and she will also go ahead and share her co-presenters today.
All right, thank you so much, Allison. Welcome, everyone. It's very nice to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who will be watching later on a recorded version, thank you so much for your keen interest in what we all view as a very, very important topic. Many of you, I'm so pleased to see familiar faces. So many of you have had the great pleasure of meeting already. Thank you. Welcome back. Nice to see you all. But I haven't met everyone. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say I'm Paula Lancaster. I'm in my third year serving as the Dean of the College of Education and Human Services here at Central Michigan University. My professional background is in special education with an emphasis in learning disabilities. And I have worked in the state of Michigan for more than 20 years as a teacher educator. So I've long been aware of the talent and interest and expertise in literacy in our state, across the entire state, and more specifically at CMU. In my previous position, I was definitely an admirer of the programming and the approach that was happening here at Central. And so really thrilled to be able to work with the individuals who I'm about to introduce and to let you know that they are top-notch people. We are so fortunate, so very fortunate to have them working here at Central Michigan University and working diligently across the state to improve literacy outcomes for all children and youth. So with that in mind, I am going to welcome Dr. Megan Block and Dr. Chad Waldron. I'm pleased that we'll have this opportunity to learn together from them. I'd love for them to take a moment to tell us a little bit more about their work. I know some of their background. I don't know all of the things that they do, but I know they are having a tremendous impact, and they're going to share those things with you. So to kick it off, we'll start by welcoming Megan and Chad. And could you share a little bit about yourselves, the focus of your work, both here at CMU, but also in the broader community? And then just really quickly, again, as a reminder to all of you, please feel free to unmute and ask questions or put your questions in the chat. We would love for this to be a conversation. So thank you. And Chad and Megan, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, I'm Megan Block. This is actually I'm finishing my 10th year at CMU. So that sounds like a long time. Prior to CMU, I have spent time as an elementary teacher. I've taught kindergarten, first, second, and fourth grades, both in Illinois and in Michigan. So at CMU, I teach many undergraduate courses related to literacy, especially in the elementary, early childhood. I'm also the director of the Literacy Master's program here, and I also teach courses in that program. Part of my work at CMU, I also am a co-editor of the Michigan Reading Journal. So I get the unique opportunity to read a lot of the research and the perspectives of practitioners and get a firsthand account really of what's happening around schools and districts and what people are thinking about and what people are sort of needing in terms of literacy support in the schools. Around the state, I do some work with MDA. I've written the professional standards for preparation and the questions for the MTTC that all of our student teacher candidates take to get certified. And then with Chad, I do work on the literacy essentials, a lot of work with Chad on the pre-K literacy essentials. So we do a lot of support and training of trainers for pre-kindergarten teachers. We've done a number of trainings for them. And then separately, I do a lot of work with the literacy coaching intensives around writing professional development, and I support writing instruction in the elementary classrooms in different districts.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So you can hear in Megan's experiences and her reach and impact why I say how fortunate we are to have her with us. So thank you for sharing that. Chad, we'll turn it over to you. Chad's relatively new to us at CMU.
Yes. So Chad Waldron, I'm the Marie Burrell Endowed Professor of Literacy, which also means I am the director of the Literacy Center here in the College of Education and Human Services. I am not new to Michigan. I have been in higher education in Michigan and in educator preparation for, I was sitting here counting the years, close to 9 years. So if Megan and I were to add our experiences during grad school plus CMU, we both were at Michigan State University for our PhD work, which is how we know one another and got to work way back. Megan was actually, fun fact, my mentor when I was a new graduate student. She was 3 years ahead of me. So now we get to work together again, which is just fantastic. So as Megan mentioned, we do work with the state. I've worked with MDE around the new preparation standards. I actually served on the steering committee for the literacy standards, as well as the new early childhood standards of quality, which will be launched in Michigan this spring. They should be coming out this month, pending the Board of Approval, the Board of Education approval, which will now focus on birth through age 5. So it'll be a continuous document showing the developmental continuum of literacy from infancy all the way up till school entry, which is a really exciting change in Michigan. It used to be separate documents that we operated in, an infant, toddler, then a preschool developmental document. And of course, that just doesn't make sense with kids and teachers. We know that it's a continuum and kids are developing along a continuum. And to help kids in Michigan be successful, we need that continuum. So I was really proud to be selected and chosen to do that work, which wrapped up this fall. As Megan mentioned, we work with MDE and MESA on the pre-K literacy essentials. So really establishing what they call an ecosystem across birth through 12th grade, that we are improving literacy outcomes in Michigan. Michigan, for a very long time, historically has trailed behind in literacy. We've actually increased those scores pre-pandemic with all of the things we're doing in the state of Michigan. And of course, now resetting after the pandemic and getting us back to that successful space that we were in. Thanks to the hard work of teachers and administrators across the state collaborating with us as literacy researchers, which is a really neat opportunity. I was previously, before I went back and got my PhD, I had a master's as a reading specialist. So I actually served in a kindergarten through 5th grade building as a reading specialist. I had an elementary and early childhood degree, so I was dual certified. And then got to serve as a district literacy coach. So I actually coached elementary and middle school settings and did some work with high school students in intervention. So I am kind of a birth to death literacy person. My expertise, though, is early childhood and elementary, very much so. But a lot of my work in recent years has been on family and community literacy. Most importantly, Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, which is a free book gifting program that sends children books from birth all the way until age 5 when they enter school, completely free of charge, thanks to donors. And we have it here in Gratiot Isabella. It's in many counties throughout Michigan, and it's an international program. So it's a really fascinating program to study and be a part of, because we know books in the home make a huge difference for families and caregivers and make a huge difference for children's outcomes in literacy. So I'm very excited to be in the conversation today and to be at CMU this first year. And as we jokingly say, I got to start in the summer months helping and supporting things with CEHS. So it feels like this has become home for quite a while. So I'm very glad to be with you all.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Wow. So listening to the both of you, hard to know exactly where to start with this next question. And some of the things maybe you've mentioned a little bit, and we could build off, because I did want to talk a little bit about literacy related initiatives that are happening in the state. So you've mentioned the fact that we have new standards, that we have new assessments that will be coming. We're taking a different approach to the preparation of teachers, but there are also other things going on as well. So I wonder if you could take a moment to share some of the literacy related initiatives that kind of rise to the top for you. And maybe it's following up on things you've already mentioned or other things too. And then talk a little bit about how we here at CMU are either participating or responding to those initiatives. And I'll leave it up to you to decide who goes first.
I'll be nice and let Megan go first, and then I will, and then I can chime in because we work together all the time.
Yeah, so I think obviously one of the biggest challenges in the state right now is that we are facing a teacher shortage, and we're facing the teacher shortage amidst the continuous work that we still are doing to really support students' literacy. And, when I think about the role that CMU is playing in that, what jumps to mind is that we have a teacher shortage, but we also have a very strong need for really strong teachers who know research supported practices, who understand, in this case, the complexities of literacy development, how to assess and how to base curriculum choices, lesson plans, objectives on the results of those assessments. So when I think about my work at CMU and the broader scope of what's happening in the world of literacy here in the state, I really think that as a faculty, we've committed ourselves to understanding the current research. We know we need to align with the new professional standards. We're keeping abreast of the literacy essentials, and we're really working hard to sort of bridge the work we do in research and supporting in-service teachers with the work that we've done supporting pre-service teachers. I regularly talk to my students and share them exactly when I'm sharing a slide with them or giving them an activity that I'm doing the exact same thing, maybe even the next day or the next week in an ISD or a district with in-service teachers, and being able to show them what the conversations that are happening in schools are the same conversations we're happening here. So just sort of making that bridge, recognizing that we have some challenges, we have some opportunities for growth and support here in Michigan, but looking at it as the opportunity and as CMU's really instrumental role in supporting not just churning out teachers to address the shortage, but churning out teachers who are ready to support our youth and lead us out of post-pandemic.
Yes, yeah, that is such a that level of detail that you're talking about. With it's not enough to teach what needs to be taught to candidates. It clearly, one of the things that we have not done well in educator preparation is make that bridge and is make the connections to practice. And so sometimes by the time the candidates get into their first classrooms, they're teachers now, they've sort of lost what that connection might be. And I really appreciate you focusing on and bringing them into that world of what's happening in the profession so that they can see that what they're learning here is going to apply, and this is how they're going to use it. So thank you. It's a great perspective to share.
I think echoing that too, Paula, as you called out, is also taking our literacy classes out into the field with our undergraduates, right? We all remember what it's like to be 18, 19, 20, 21, most of us maybe, possibly, right? And to be very unsure of the future that is ahead of us, but knowing that this commitment, right, to teaching, to working with kids, to being in classrooms. And so we are trying to prepare our candidates for real world situations. And part of that is getting them out in the field faster, sooner, getting them into local schools, getting them into districts that are distant, doing virtual opportunities where we work with our CMU charter school network to let them see the diversity of schools that will be be part of public education when they enter public education in the state of Michigan and really beyond. We want them to stay in Michigan. We're preparing them for Michigan, but we also know too that some of them may leave us, and we want them to be well prepared wherever they go to be leaders in the classroom. And part of it is in literacy, there is that science that we prepare them with, as Megan talked about, the research-informed, research-guided best practices. The other part of it is the art that we often talk about in educator preparation, which is the real world experience of working with kids, working with families and caregivers, and working with the community, which looks very different from place to place and school to school. There are similarities, but there are certainly differences. So really preparing our candidates well to interface in any of those situations to be the best representation of what we want for them as educators in the classroom leading children. And research has shown in teacher preparation, as Paula alluded to in educator preparation, that's one of the things we've not done well historically. So at CMU, we are changing that. We know that research tells us they need to be out sooner. They need to be in front of kids. They need to be doing things in real classrooms. So we've implemented that as part of our course sequence. For example, I teach EDU 533, which is a literacy assessment class where our students tutor children both in CMU charter schools and in Mount Pleasant public schools, and they tutor them throughout the semester. So they're getting the real world experience of assessing a child, working one-to-one with a child through individual designed lessons, which they can scale up to small groups of children, and then to whole class lessons, thinking about what kids would need. So really preparing them well to do the things they're going to do in their school settings, and getting them to concentrate on that content. One of the things we've done is enhanced part of MDE's commitment, the Michigan Department of Education, is to expand the literacy course offerings in our pre-K through third grade band, as well as making sure they're well prepared for grades 3 to 6, the grade bands that Megan and I most often, teach in. We also teach in birth to pre-K, really thinking about how we well prepare candidates to go out into the world for whatever the literacy scenario might be, which, to Megan's point, post-pandemic, we need teachers in the classroom that are prepared for a diversity of learners that we're going to see, and really giving them that background knowledge and experience so they feel well prepared when they take the helm of a classroom.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do want to say and acknowledge that these changes that we're implementing in our programs, these are not easy changes. It's frankly easier to just share knowledge and information with candidates and hope for the best. It's very time consuming. It's to create and monitor and keep an eye on those field experiences. There's a lot of collaboration that happens with the sites in which we're working. But I completely agree. I've advocated for this many, many times. This is the way that we really need to go. I use the basketball analogy a lot, and some of you may have heard me say that. We wouldn't expect people to practice dribbling, to hear us talk about what the game is, to maybe practice shooting a little bit, to maybe even watch a movie or a video of somebody playing the game, and then all of a sudden bring another team in, blow the whistle, and they just get started. That would never happen. That wouldn't happen in most arenas. We would scrimmage, we would practice. We could apply that same approach to anyone else. But in the past, we have not done that nearly enough with teachers. We haven't given them enough opportunities to have the experiences in low risk situations, to get feedback, to build some muscle around the work of teachers. And so they've often faced and encountered some, situations their very first time in their own classroom. So this gives them a chance to kind of get a feel for what their strengths are, what they need some growth and development in, and also to just, understand how children react to instruction all the time. I just applaud the efforts and really, really appreciate all of the work that goes into making those things happen. So thank you.
I would add too that, I often use the sports analogy, which is kind of ironic because I'm like the least athletic in my family. I like to do like running, like I don't like balls and like anything hand-eye.
Balls in space.
Yeah. But my children do. But I use that to talk up to them sometimes, in order, from what I see, in order to play baseball really well, like sometimes you have to do things that don't always look like the game of baseball. Like sometimes you have to sit there and maybe just swing the bat or use a towel and throw it to give some muscle memory. And so really being explicit with students and when we're sort of practicing and learning skills that's going to lead to the classroom, because sometimes I think we haven't been explicit. And then sometimes our students think that what we're doing is a little bit irrelevant, but we need to start small and work on those smaller things. And then as we prepare them for the game, and I think that our field experience can help them see what's going on in the bigger picture, and it helps us see. And then we can be a little bit more explicit, like, yes, you too are going to lead that really dynamic discussion. First, we're going to practice on what is an open-ended question and how can we ask a good question and how can we, facilitate discussions. And so I think that that's one of the changes with the changes in the preparation standard and the changes that we've made to our program with expanding the field experience, thinking about like these core teaching practices. It's really forced us to be really explicit with our students. And when we're working on those tiny skills that sometimes are necessary to play the game. So
Yeah, that's right. Right. I can remember learning how to shoot a layup and doing that one arm, one leg up in the air over and over again and thinking the same thing, like, how is this going to help? But then when you actually do it and realize, oh, that's it. That's what we're trying to employ with our candidates. And it's a very different approach to teacher preparation than what they're accustomed to, what they've heard about. So there's some growing pains with our students too. I think a lot about the first couple times I implemented rehearsals in classrooms with our students. So we'd have them rehearse some skills. And in a rehearsal, you naturally stop and provide a little bit more instruction and sometimes ask them to start over. And our candidates really struggle with that sometimes. They're not used to being told, nope, actually, you need to do it this way. Now try it again. And so, it's going to take us a bit of time to have these types of approaches become much more fluent for us as well as for our teacher candidates. Yeah.
And I think another part to this, that when you talked about responding to initiatives, Paula, how are we a part of that conversation? One thing that attracted me to CMU, both at the previous Michigan institution I was at, plus being here now, is being able to have a seat at the table in policy conversations, right? We have worked with educator preparation. We've also worked with in-service teachers. So Megan and I have done a lot of work in both arenas, right? Folks that are very new, that are learning to be teachers, to folks that have been in the field 10, 15, 20 plus years, that are relearning or learning additional skills to expand. And being able to be at the table with Michigan Department of Educators, with the legislature, with others, to actually advocate for the things that we need, knowing the things that research tells us we need to be doing for literacy, for children's success in the classroom, because at the end of the day, it's the children sitting in front of us. What can we be as the best teachers, the best researchers to support their success? So using that knowledge and research that we gain through being in classrooms, working with teachers, but also thinking about where are the faults, where are the things, as we've talked about, that haven't been going well, that we need more of to create the next generation of teachers that will be even better. And we have a lot of great teachers in practice. Don't get me wrong, I see them every single day, every single week when I'm out in classrooms, but also enhancing and bringing up the profession. It's much like in medicine, which is also a profession that constantly is learning and changing. Medicine doesn't stay static. There's constantly motion. Education is very much like that, and moving with the times to make sure that we're responding for the learners and the new knowledge we have from research sitting in front of us. So policy is one part. The other part is community outreach, getting to work through the Literacy Center, getting to work with kids in the community and beyond is a huge asset as a university. One of the unique things that universities and colleges are often indicted for is we're kind of what they call the ivory tower, right? We have all this great knowledge and skill and we kind of lock it in and we're not always the best with sharing it. Here in CEHS, that is not the case. We are constantly out in the community, which was a huge part of why I wanted to be here in this role, because being out in the community, being with kids and teachers, doing the work that we need to do and having space to do that as part of the work that I do is huge. And that makes a huge difference on Michigan teachers and children by actually having the time and space to be out there with them and sharing that knowledge and working with them about the unique problems they're facing and helping them to problem solve. So I think policy and the community aspects as well are a huge part of the things that Megan and I work towards as literacy faculty to kind of do the complete circle and close it, that it's not just preparing them as undergraduates or coming back to get your master's degree or even a doctoral degree, but rather continually having that conversation and be in conversation with them.
Yeah, yep. And that's the way that you used the phrase, I think, ecosystem earlier. That's the way we stop having siloed separate spaces and create much more of a connected ecosystem where we're all learning from each other and just really flatten that tower as much as possible. Absolutely. Well, you gave me a perfect lead into another topic I want to talk about, which is the Literacy Center and the work that we're doing in community. And we're so excited as I think we can call it post-pandemic. I hope that's where we are. But we're really excited about kind of that relaunch of the Literacy Center and the work that's been happening. And you, Chad, you really did dig in right from the moment you started on campus to move us forward in your role as the center director. And I also know that the two of you have partnered and worked really hard together on these kind of outreach work. So what can you share about new directions within the CMU Literacy Center and within our community outreach work?
So I think some highlights that we can share was the launch of a new professional development series. We've done professional development series before, but we have a new fall professional development series, which is focused in early literacy. So really focusing on those foundational elements that we know the science of reading and other research that has come out in recent years that teachers across the spectrum teaching need to understand where children's development and literacy starts and have a well solidified knowledge in that, from phonics to phonemic awareness to vocabulary development to fluency and how that impacts reading comprehension. So this fall we had the professional development series. We also, in my first summer here this past summer and coming up again this summer, is our signature summer institute, which we bring in service practicing teachers from across the state. We've opened it up. It used to be very community and regional focused, and we still have those great relationships, but we're also now very fortunate to be able to welcome in teachers from across the state with the support of various donors and doing that outreach work to bring in more folks to the Summer Institute, where they get a stipend, professional development books. Of course, there's limitations because we only have so much in our donor, but our donor has been quite generous and so supportive in helping us to really make the Summer Institute a huge success. And when teachers have time off and want to do something fun for their learning, and I know learning and professional development and fun don't often hang together, but we really try to make it a beneficial thing based on what we're hearing in the field. So this focus for this summer is K-12 writing instruction and assessment, really focusing on how we develop good writers, because we know writing and reading are intricately linked. And that if we have a child who is a successful writer, they're also going to be a successful reader. And those two things walk hand in hand. So really working on that in the month of June for our week-long intensive professional development. And then we're also going to do a webinar series where we go back and kind of broaden our reach to folks who may be in the UP or in Detroit or Grand Rapids that are more distant to campus that can receive professional development free of charge. They can get sketch hours, which are their continuing education credits, to develop that expertise. So we're excited about that. One of the future things that we're working on and really just working to secure funding and develop is a pre-service teacher module series to develop literacy content knowledge. As Megan alluded to, the new standards from the Michigan Department of Education are very, very rigorous. We have about 9 concentration areas in the standards that focus on specific parts of literacy in very much in depth. And of course, our candidates have to take the Michigan Test for Teacher Certification, or the MTTC. So we're working on a free to our CMU candidates professional development series of videos and practice quizzes and additional tutorials you would think a 4-year degree would be plenty of time for us to get through everything, and we get through a lot, but we also know that we need reviews before we go into major standardized assessments. So we're working on that as kind of a learning tutorial to support our candidates both in program and when they exit, to remind them of the core content and practices, the core teaching practices, so that they feel strengthened and supported going into the classroom through a professional learning series. And so we are working on that this summer and fall, and very excited for next year. We're looking to develop a spring professional development series. So some exciting new things that are on the horizon, and we're forming new partnerships with Mount Pleasant Public Schools and other local school districts to really expand the opportunities for our candidates to be a part of the work that they're doing.
Yes, yeah. And I love the idea of the tutorial. I think it is spot on for what our candidates are going to need, because you're right, they take in so much during their preparation program. And that cognitive load can be really, really heavy. We never know for sure what they're prioritizing in those moments. So some things are going to slip away, and they have to have that foundational knowledge in order to be successful on the assessments. And then, yeah, you had shared some of the great new initiatives that you're working on and moving forward with. So it's really exciting. Megan, I didn't mean to cut you off. You want to?
And I'm sure I forgot something, Megan, so please chime in.
And about community work in general.
Yeah, no, I think you addressed it all. I mean, I am excited about the tutorials. It's been something that I've really been wanting to do for a long time. I teach at the end of the program, and so often students are getting very nervous about that, because that is definitely important. They cannot be certified without passing those assessments. And so, you know, I've worked to really put sample questions within the curriculum, and I just think, like, I'm just excited for the opportunities that this is going to afford them, and some of the just like weight it's going to lift off at the end of the program, when it should be a time of being excited about going into student teaching, but you can just sense the stress and anxiety about having to remember everything. And obviously they remember a lot more than they think, but just, we know that when we teach people how to do things and expose them to the different genres that they're going to be expected to engage in, that they can be more successful in applying their knowledge in that sort of way. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, we do have a question from Stephanie in the chat. So she says, oftentimes when literacy is mentioned, the focus is on students learning to read. What supports are in place for educators in the upper grades and focusing on reading to learn? Yeah,
so I mean, in our coursework, the coursework that Chad and I predominantly do is birth to grade 6 with the new standards, although we still are teaching students on the old program, so that would be with middle school certification as well. But in the courses that we're teaching, we really are focused on all elements of literacy development. So we're talking about what the different stages look like, identifying some characteristics of children at these different stages, talking about how we might assess students, and really thinking about how we would form small groups or individualized instruction. We practice, you know, we talk about instructional strategies for students in terms of comprehension development. We talk about vocabulary development. And with all of these things, we're talking about all the constructs of literacy, both when children are first learning them or maybe even before, right? And then the continuum. So now once they are reading, or now, you know, what else can we do? So, you know, and I do think we think of it as a continuum less than grades, because we know that we're going to be meeting children's needs in all different grades with all different needs at all different times. So our program and the standards really do force the thinking about all that. It's no longer, oh, I'm just going to teach first grade. I only need to learn phonics. That we really are intentional that all of it's important all of the time. And phonics is still important in 7th grade, right? Like, we're still learning about morphology and word parts. So
yeah.
And I think
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to expand on, Stephanie, you brought up a really interesting point about how we always focus on reading, right? And we know from research that it's really literacy. We're preparing children and adults to be literate, right? So under literacy is reading, writing, speaking, viewing, listening in multimodal text, which gets to Jean's point of online and offline text, right? So nested under the literacy umbrella, we have all of these processes that have to run simultaneously, that we scale kids up in developmentally to be well prepared. I think about my 3-year-old at home who literally can access apps on my iPhone. He does a speech app on my iPhone, knows exactly where to go on the screen, knows exactly how to click on the button, knows exactly how to interact with the text. And that is an online text, something that was recommended to us by a professional to use with him for his speech and language development. And so in thinking about that, this reading to learn paradigm, right, that Stephanie is bringing up, part of that is we have to, from a very early age, start to focus on informational text, nonfiction text. For many of us, when we went through school, everyone that is sitting on this call, oftentimes we were in narrative fiction text, which is great, but we also need to prepare children to read nonfiction informational text. Think about all of us getting ready to do taxes, right? Or if you've done your taxes, reading the forms for taxes is an informational text that is not something we see day in and day out. And to be able to understand and comprehend the tax guides, the steps with that, this is why we have an accountant. Many of us go to someone, I'm sure, to get our taxes done, or if you do it yourself, we have to understand that text. It's very different. It's like our car manual. I always tell my candidates and teachers in practice, it would be like if a light comes on your dashboard. We've all had it happen. You have to pull off to the side of the road because you don't recognize that. You're going into an informational text, the car manual. And for many of us, that is not our core knowledge. It is not something that we do day in and day out. There may be a car person on this call, like my brother, who I think of, who fixes cars for fun on the side, which sounds like absolute torture to me, but that is something he does for stress relief. He has a very different skill set of informational text than I do. There are things that I've read and learned that he doesn't have access to. We all do, and we have to well prepare kids at an early age with those strategies of looking at text structures, looking at strategies, preparing them to do that, and then doing it, to Jean's point, online and offline. Because when many of us log in to look for something on Google, looking at those search engine results requires a different skill, and we need to model that for kids, than what it would be to pick up a book and read a chapter book, right? Those skills are not one-to-one. They're very, very different. And so we have to model that and practice that and use it. And the standards call us to do that, not just the preparation standards, but the standards teachers will use when they're in the classroom. Michigan's ELA standards for K-12 kids tells us we need to start modeling as early as 3rd grade online skill access to show children how to access online texts.
You know, and I think also, I think Jean's your question made me think of too, that social media does impact us in a lot of ways also, because there's a lot of misinformation happening on social media. And so when we're out in the field or addressing students' questions, it is something that we deal with, especially, one topic we haven't talked about is that there are some reading, the wars are back in a different way. And in my opinion, thankfully, the sides aren't as far apart as maybe they used to be. But that influence of social media and hearing this and thinking about that is definitely at play in our pre-student teacher candidates and in the in-service teachers that we work on. And I think that it just really forces us to come back to thinking about the research. And for me, one of the most exciting thing that's come out of the return of the wars, or, I don't know even what to call them, but because I don't think I think the intentions are the same behind every stance. And I think we're not that far apart. But what the exciting part for me is that the focus is on research, and we're really actually digging into sort of what the science is saying and looking at what's happening with our students and really making a lot of decisions based on that. I think, the difference is that what research that we're willing to look at and engage with. And then Pam, I noticed too about lifelong professional development and keeping engaged with students. So every year at the end of 380, I read my students Wherever You Go. And I love the book. It talks about all the different things that roads can do and how roads can merge and roads can separate and roads wind and come back. And sometimes we face detours. And I just think it's the beautiful metaphor for what they've experienced through their teacher preparation program. But then always the invitation that roads lead back home. And for me, I think of, I encourage them to reach out to their course instructors I would say in our newest cohort of literacy masters, actually in the past few, we have many return students. So it's kind of exciting. For some of them, I've taught them in their very first literacy course and several throughout their undergraduate. And now I get to work with them again through their graduate courses. But I also think that that's where social media provides a really great opportunity to continue to network and support and interact with students, reaching out for, I have this, can you help me with this? Or one time we talked about this, or I noticed you were speaking at the school next to me. Do you mind if I get those resources? So I think that the benefits and assets of social media in that regard can be really powerful.
Yeah, connections, networks, maintaining those communications, really, really helpful. Yeah, so we have a couple questions about artificial intelligence and how it might play a role in preparing teachers. And I will say, I think about virtual reality quite a lot. Megan Moreno and I have had multiple conversations about this because I have a dream that we will have a simulation lab in our college, and we'll have opportunities for our candidates to simulate lots of situations that you can't easily kind of role play or predict necessarily, but they'd have a chance to try some of those things out. And so the way I think about artificial intelligence is I think more in kind of virtual reality, the opportunity for candidates to have that feeling of being in front of a classroom, working with students, and have the, whether it's avatars or whatever that might be, respond to them in real time as children would do. And there is some of that technology that's available. We've had access to it a little bit here too, so that they're not encountering some of these difficult situations for the first time in front of their entire class. So they have a sense for what things might unfold in front of them, and how to respond, and kind of what to do, what not to do, and also to get feedback in real time as well. So I do think about ways that we could really capitalize on the strengths that AI might bring to the table. And I realize that right now people are really concerned about some of what's out there in AI, but I think there's some possibilities. And I don't know how much, I know that I'm sure you talk about this a bit in your program. So what do you think?
Well, another part too, Jean talked about how will this play a role. Troy Hicks, who is one of our colleagues, actually is associate faculty in the Literacy Center, has written a piece recently about Chat GPT. We've all heard about Chat GPT on the news, the software algorithm that can write and mimic human writing, right? With very limited prompting, it can actually create narrative prompts, which of course becomes a concern for plagiarism, becomes a concern for authentic writing. Many middle school and high school teachers in English language arts are actually harnessing Chat GPT to show students what the writing produces versus writing that they've done before. So they're actually harnessing the AI technology, using it to show children, show adolescents, this is what writing can look like when you use an artificial intelligence device. However, notice how it's so different than your voice as a writer in the previous writings that you've done. So they're actually using it as a compare and contrast to show them this tool is incomplete. Yes, it can get an assignment done. Yes, it can write it, but it does not sound like you. It is not of quality. It's not the same voice that you have as a writer. For example, something I wrote recently for Literacy Research Association, which I'm a part of, and was invited to write, someone complimented and said, Chad, I could hear your voice in the writing, to which I giggled and said, well, of course, because literally it was a transcript of a talk I gave that I translated into a written piece that I put in this publication that's forthcoming. So AI has, right? And that's AI that transcribed that talk for me of the audio of a talk that I gave that I used to write the narrative piece. It was my language that was in that, but I used it as a guide, right? It wasn't the exact replica of what I ended up writing. I expanded it and changed it and morphed it into what I wanted for the final piece. But I think teaching adolescents, particularly older children who are going to lean on those things, look at what it can provide, but look at the limitations, because we know artificial intelligence is not going away. In fact, it's ever increasing. So how do we teach them to use it appropriately, to use it in ways that are bounded, to use it in ways that actually are educative at the end of the day, that show it can give you something, but it's not going to give you everything. So Great questions about AI.
Yes. I wonder what you all were thinking about when you asked the question, like if you had some thoughts or ideas in mind. I mean, I certainly have my lens and way I think about the possibilities there. And I do think, I really appreciate actually that we're having these conversations, because it would be really short-sighted of us to imagine that AI, VR, don't have a role, and that we want to continue to do things as they are. That would be just incredibly short-sighted, and would miss out on some, I think, golden opportunities to, as Chad's pointing out, to capitalize on the potential and ways that we can use them instructionally. So if you want to share some thoughts or ideas, please feel free to, either in the chat or unmute and jump in.
Well, my daughter's a doctor, and they're starting to explore using that in teaching surgeries and
Yep.
Other things from a medical standpoint. So I was curious, from an education standpoint, how you might use it, and you explained that.
Yeah. We honestly, I use that medical model quite a bit in my own thinking about what we might be able to do. So we've used a technology, Immersion is the company that owns it right now, but there are others that offer it. And it's a simulation tool. So they call it avatar technology with a human in the loop. Can't see the human. You can only see the children on the screen. Our students could only see the children on the screen. But they are responding in real time. And there's a camera, so the children can see the candidate can see the children. And you can work through lessons and particular moves that teachers make, and the students respond as students would respond, because they're being manipulated by a very well-trained human who's in the background. And it mimics the level of kind of adrenaline that a teacher has in front of actual students. They've done some tests to ensure that, yep, it's that lifelike, it's that possible. We can also simulate parent-teacher conferences, one-on-one conversations with students. You can simulate just a range of situations that happen in schools. And then you can do it a couple different ways, where you can stop, get some feedback, try again, or stop, talk about, well, what if this happened? And because the person is listening behind the screen, they can adjust the simulation and throw out some additional wrenches that might happen. So it's really a fantastic low risk way to practice really challenging aspects of teaching. And then we also are doing what we call simulated student interactions that are kind of elevated role plays, very scripted, based on science, based on what we know about child development. So those types of resources and opportunities to practice like that, I think, are exactly what's needed. But back to Megan's point, we try to do these things progressively throughout the preparation program, but they take up a lot of time and space within the program too. And so candidates are making choices about what to spend their cognitive energy on. And that's why we also need to have these knowledge-based tutorials to help refresh their memory about the information that they've accumulated over time too. It's really quite a lot that our candidates are learning in the course of their 4 years, starting with kind of the unpacking of what they thought they knew about teaching. And
that's exactly what I was going to say. Like,
please do.
A lot of this virtual reality stuff can also help them recognize what they don't know, right? Because there is, it's kind of cliche to say, but it's actually really true that most people think that having been a student makes you a qualified teacher. But in a safe environment, I haven't done a lot with virtual reality, but I did sit in on a training and introduction to it, and saw some different programs, and was just really excited by that, because what it will do is let them realize that in a very safe way, where they can get feedback right away, because part of that is, it takes more than a passion for, like, a love and passion for children, definitely critical, but it's a lot more than that. And most often at the end of the program, they're like, wow, what I didn't realize is that, like, you have to know a lot to be a teacher. And I think that those simulations could help them and do help them. But as we alluded to, like even having a lab gives them that potential to learn that a little bit faster and to really dive in and explore with that. I often tell my students, like, the fact that you're thinking about this, the fact that you're nervous about how you're going to group students and meet their individual needs is remarkable. The fact that that's what you're thinking about and feeling nervous about, like, I don't have an answer right now for you, but like figuring that you know that that's something you have to think about, you're leaps and bounds ahead already, and you're going to work on that. So
yeah, excellent. That's right. So Stephanie asked what's needed to bring the simulation lab into fruition. It's a great question. You know, I think we certainly have the space here. We certainly have lots of folks who are interested in learning more, becoming more expert at using simulations with their students. We have access to technology. The bottom line is the technology is pricey. There's a cost to it. And so for us, a lot of it is just figuring out what's the best, most judicious use of simulations. They are not things that you want to use day in and day out. They really are meant to be ways to practice pretty specific things. And so part of it's just taking the time to think, like, what is the best use of this technology judiciously within our program so that it has the greatest impact? And then how can we create kind of that range of high-tech, low-tech types of simulations that will work best with our students, get faculty, up to speed. They do require, whether you're doing high-tech or low-tech simulations, they require considerable feedback and very specific types of feedback. So we all need to certainly continue to brush up on our skills in those areas as well. But I think it's just such an exciting change that is coming about in the way that we prepare teachers. And I feel very strongly that in the coming years, people are going to notice first-year teachers are more skillful than they might have been in the past because they've had the opportunity to do these things. The knowledge is still going to be there, the desire, the interest, the excitement, all going to be there. But I think we're going to see higher levels of skillfulness in their beginner level work. Yeah, I think that grants are exactly the way that we need to be looking for and thinking about and partnering with others in order to make that happen. Yeah, it's exciting that you all are thinking about these things too. So
yeah, no, and I know one thing we've been doing through the Literacy Center in a broader technology sense, one of the things that the pandemic taught us, wherever you're at, for example, we're on Zoom today, right? It's not a perfect medium, but it works and it allows us to reach people at distant points, right? It's very different than having us all in the same space. But it allows us to reach kids at a distance who may not have access to services like tutoring. So one of the things that the Literacy Center has been able to do, and we're looking to expand, is an after-school tutoring model that could be delivered virtually to distant points, thinking of points in the Upper Peninsula where there is internet access, but maybe not immediately a university or college with, trained, prepared teacher candidates that could support the children. I have several contacts in the Upper Peninsula from the shared work Megan and I have done across the state who would love something like this in their schools and districts to support kids in developing literacy, because they could work with a teacher candidate at CMU who's at the other side of Zoom, who's providing them with instructional resources. There's a plethora of excellent teaching platforms, online books, digital book resources, going back to Jean's question of online texts. There's a wealth of resources we could provide. So that's one of the other things we're exploring with technology, is how can we reach out, right? That it's both in-person, face-to-face things in the immediate region, but then how do we reach beyond? Because we know we have the power of these wonderful technologies that can actually make a great experience for kids. Research has shown us that kids that attend virtual literacy training and tutoring that's tailored to them can actually make significant gains. So we know kids post-pandemic need that support. So how do we support them when we can't physically reach them because they're 2, 3, 4, 7 hours away? How can we reach out to them and support them and do it in a way that's beneficial for the schools? We know schools also, we're very lucky in Michigan. We've had funding increases the last 5 years to public education settings, which is great. But we also know our public schools don't have a wealth of resources. So how can we make it supportive to them, to support them getting online, having the technology to have the kids join us, and how can CMU be that conduit through the Literacy Center, through CEHS, to do that outreach. So that's one of the things we're exploring as well. So thinking about not just AI, because AI brings a lot of great things, but how can we use everything that's been quickly developed and developed over years, thanks to the pandemic, and actually utilize that in ways to support kids in need and teachers in schools.
Great point.
We had one other question in the chat that I want to make sure we get to, since our time is coming low. It's about, are you including how to expand working memory capacity involved in learning, touching on how a person learns? If you could touch on that maybe quickly.
So I think, and Megan, please chime in too. I think one of the things that is the sciences of literacy. So I won't just say science of reading, which all of us have heard in the news or heard referenced in policy circles, but rather the sciences of literacy. We know that cognitive development is huge, that executive functioning is a huge part of how children learn to read and read to learn, and in order to develop as successful readers. And really feeds into their writing success as well, that if they have those processes in place of executive functioning, that's going to feed the loop into their broader literacy success. So in thinking about that, much of our early work in our literacy courses focuses on that literacy development from a cognitive standpoint. Much of the research that's been done for decades in literacy and in reading has been very cognitively driven. I think about Walter Kinch's model, an integration model that really looks at the cognition of reading. How do we bring words, letter visuals, sounds, shapes, paragraphs into conversation to actually comprehend? It's a complex process that we do in milliseconds as adults. So how do we slow that down for children, particularly children who may be struggling, and bring them back online in effective, productive ways? So I think working memory, we know, is something that has to be developed and it has to be strengthened. It's like a muscle, right? We're not going to pick up a 40-pound bag of dog food without being able to actually exercise a bit, getting experience with that 40-pound bag of dog food. Speaking for myself as a dog owner, we're not just going to go in the store and lift it over our head and carry it out successfully, or two of them, without actually working those muscles and building up that stamina. Reading and literacy are very much like that. We have to slow down for the brain to take those things into short-term memory to long-term memory, to make it not just a strategy, which is temporary, to a skill.
And I think we also, really quickly, is that's why we have to look to all the research, right? Like we're reading what we're learning from psychology and sociology and all of that as we inform our practices for literacy and beyond.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Now you all can see why I'm so pleased to be here at CMU working with these people. I think that also kind of goes to Mike's point, I think, which is, we are spending time in our programs helping our candidates understand the value of building relationships with students and making sure that students and children and youth feel comfortable and feel safe in their learning environments, that they truly are part of the community, and thus can feel safe in putting themselves out there and testing their own kind of limits and all those types of things as well. And that points back to, Megan's point about it's all of the research and all of the literature that helps, inform the program. So I know we're getting really short on time. Anything lasting that you want to share? Any like points of pride? Any, hey, I'm excited about this? Thank you, Pam.
Just thank you all for taking time out of your day and giving us good questions. Megan and I nerd out and love to talk about these things. Paula joins us oftentimes, which is great. And so we just enjoy having a space to talk with you all, and that you care about these things and took time out of your day to be here and to support CEHS. It's an ongoing work, and it always will be. But we just appreciate you sincerely. We would not be able to do the things we do without all of you.
Yeah, I just always get excited, like when alum come back and the alumni want to share, because it just really underscores the importance of legacy and the importance of the strength of the institution, that it's, has that big of an impact, that it's, something that people enjoy returning to, and that we can engage in conversations to sort of continue that legacy as we move the university forward.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much for coming, for sharing your time with us. We truly do appreciate it. Thank you, Chad and Megan, for sharing your expertise. I couldn't be more, as I said, more pleased to be able to highlight your work in this time together. We really hope we see all of you in coming sessions that we have. Feel free to come to campus any chance you get. Thank you for supporting educators, education, and literacy in the state of Michigan. CMU has the best alums, and this is yet one more of those data points, if we're talking about research, that solidifies that fact. So we really appreciate you all. Thank you. Yes, and fire up. Great. Yes.
I have one quick thing to say just before everyone signs off. We will be having another session next week on the 12th, focusing on poverty. The other thing I wanted to say is I will be sending out the recording link so you all can have it if you need it to refer back to or want to see it again. That way also other individuals who couldn't attend can participate. And then I'll also be sending a link to a really short survey. And if you wouldn't mind taking that, it just helps us moving forward for things like this. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your great questions, comments. See you soon.